Hi everyone, thanks for taking a few minutes to take a look at this video. Whether you attended our live webinar and were able to interact with us there, and this is a follow-up to refresh and renew your own thoughts about this material, or if you weren't able to join us and this is your first watch, welcome. My name is Dr. Selena Pearman, and it's been a pleasure to offer some support and resources and maybe a few additional insights that will inspire and encourage you during these unique and challenging times. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have about this content or any ways that I can help encourage and support you at Selena, C-E-L-I-N-A at Pearman, P as in Paul, E-E-R-M-A-N, group, Group.com. It will be listed again in writing at the end of this video. Meanwhile, take a few minutes, shut down everything else that might be going on around you if you're able, and let's tune in to some ideas and thoughts about how the changing world of work impacts our motivation and what tools we can use to navigate these uncertain and challenging times. I look forward to sharing that with you. That comes up next. Today, we want to focus on keeping your emotional intelligence as strong as it can be, even when things feel chaotic. Today, I want you to consider something that may be important to you: music. There are some music enthusiasts amongst us. Music has an amazing and powerful way of playing a central role in our lives, in expression, in really being able to put things in perspective that maybe we just don't get the same way through other mediums. I want you to consider for a moment what's on your playlist. What do you have marked? And think about a song or a lyric that describes your mood or your team's mood right now. Now, if this session was live, you might see some of those titles showing up in the chat room. But let me give you a few thoughts of what often comes up. Working 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton, right? Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train. There are so many different titles and songs out of all different genres that sometimes just perk us up or speak to us or might describe the mood in which we're currently battling, in maybe some of the challenges or the lack of motivation or the troubles that we're trying to work through. Music does have a powerful influence in our lives in many ways, and often we can remember that song or that lyric connected to that emotion and moment in our own life. Well, I love using this exercise with groups because as people scroll through their playlist or even do an internet search for songs and lyrics about work, they all of a sudden start chuckling at what titles come up and what lyrics they went, oh, that so describes us right now. Take a minute to even do that and see what you might connect with. What title or lyric really helps you describe, this is how I'm feeling right now. Because even if we use that opening exercise, I want to tie it to our content for today, and that is the changing world of work. If we look at the definition of work, it is an activity involving that effort, right? That mental and physical effort that's done in order to achieve a purpose or result. It's those tasks we do. It's that engagement we have in getting those activities to get to a result. Our work may look different. Our job titles may be different than somebody else's job titles. But when we exchange 30, 35, 40, 45% of our adult work, our life for work, work has a pretty significant impact. But it's not the job title, it's the effort, it's the task, it's the activity that we may be doing as part of that work. And especially during these unique and challenging times, the work may have shifted. I was visiting with someone not too long ago, and she simply made more of an exasperated comment to me. And she said, you know what? I don't know what my job is anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's just email. She'd lost touch with the purpose of that work and what that connection was and what she actually did as a job, because it just felt like she was overloaded with email. What I want you to consider today is how your work has shifted. If you were co-located with other people and now you're geographically dispersed, if the nature of your work has changed because something has shifted in these unique times, your work as an employee may look different. Your work as an owner, a volunteer, an activist, a supporter, a caregiver, a family member, an advocate, or even if you've chosen to for public service. The work itself may have shifted. We know that those who've chosen to parent, all of a sudden with school age kids, end up teaching way more than they ever planned on it. So while the work may shift, what I want us to recognize today is that with that shift can come all sorts of responses and reactions that I want us paying attention to and listening to, so that as we pay attention and listen to, oh, I miss that. I miss the drive to work. Or now that I'm going back to work after being isolated, what's this feel like and look like? For this session, I want to focus on 4 questions. Number 1, how has your work shifted and what does it feel like? Depends on which phase of 2020 that you are in. If that is working in isolation or is that starting to come back together? Has the organization shifted or the work focus has shifted because of the time we're in? What change has impacted your work the most? What motivates you or demotivates you about that change? And how can we use some of the tools that we have available to us in some of the emotional intelligence work that helps us navigate the now better? First, that world of work. You know, it's interesting that when we take a look at that effort and that extension of what we do to um, bring about activity or get those tasks done, we know that work does some really interesting things for us in this modern day. It focuses our energy. It gives us social contact. It gives us collective effort and purpose. It also draws on and helps us sustain a social identity. And it does give us time structure. It gives us that regular activity that we can plan around. The role of work, no matter what that work is, again, as a family member, an advocate, a public servant, an employee, when we have those focused areas of our efforts and task, it gives us many of these things. So what would you describe your work has changed? Does that look like? What has shifted for you and how does it feel? Maybe you signed up for one job, but now you feel like you're doing something different. And that's not just a 2020 COVID event. That may have already been happening for many professions that I'm aware of, right? We go into the profession to do a type of work, and then through whatever changes have happened in that profession over time, maybe we're more removed from a customer or a client, or the bulk of our work is different than it was before. I want us to acknowledge that shift, and I really want us to consider, what does that feel like? Because really what we're talking about is a change. It's an altered state. We've transitioned from one place to another. Something is different than it was. And as we consider that, we know that there are all different types of responses to change. Now, this is a modified Kubler and Ross model. And when Kubler and Ross did their research, it was focused specifically on grief. That when we experience a loss in our life, when we have mourned or have grief around that loss, that there are often stages we go through in how we process that loss and how we get to whatever that next stage is. But I want you to consider that with a little bit different twist today. I want you to think about that adapting to a change or that process of adjustment in how we move from our current state to our future state. So, for example, while there are big things in life, big losses that we might experience in our personal lives or even within our work life, I want to focus today on some of the smaller ones. It's not that the bigger ones aren't important, But that's a different session. I want to focus on the fact that we can go through this grief process 3 times in 20 minutes when we open up our email in the morning. Following along? Think about this. You open up email number 1. What? Who came up with this idea? As you exclaim from your desk, looking at your computer, reading that first email and wondering what is going on. After shock and denial, some sort of emotion might emerge. It might be frustration. It might be despair. It might be, oh, melancholy. Yeah, this is okay. We're fine. When we hit shock and denial and move through emotion, many times in this process, we hit some sort of bargaining stage, especially if that emotion is negative. So, for example, what? Who thought this up? Not doing it. Denial, emotion, bargaining. Fine. If they're going to expect me to do that, I am not staying 1 minute past 5 o'clock. Bargaining. Bargaining is when we renegotiate the terms of our commitment to this work without necessarily telling our boss. We have now reestablished, this changed. I'm going to do something different than I did before because of whatever that is that I just received. Now, hopefully we don't get stuck there. And as we look at this process more in a U shape, the idea is there is a process we go through, and eventually we hope that we can come out the other side towards that upward turn. We also recognize that in the big grief and in the daily stuff that comes up, those losses, those opportunities, we also have probably met a coworker somewhere along the way who got mad at something 10 or 15 years ago and stayed stuck at that emotion stage. People go through this process in all different kinds of ways at all different kinds of speeds. If we make it over to upward turn, sometimes it sounds like this. Fine, what do I need to do? I haven't fully committed at that point, but I'm not actively holding us back. And I love it, especially when it starts with a sigh. Fine, what do we need to do? If I don't get stuck there, if I am willing to look at the new, if I am willing to work at getting used to that change, I can usually move forward to progress and acceptance. Now, what we know about big loss and grief in our life is that this is not a simple process. You don't magically arrive at the next stage and go, wow, I made it here. And to the next stage, it's up 2, back 3, up 4, back 1. It is a dynamic process. So if we apply that to the small stuff and even the hard stuff in our day-to-day work, when the work has shifted and the work we're doing is now feels different and the people connections are different and maybe our goals are different because the work itself has shifted. Email number 1, what? Where'd this come from? The emotion, the bargaining, the upward turn, the progress, and eventual acceptance. Email number 2, what? No, what? Right? And how we can go through that cycle every time we open the next email. And there have been some times early in 2020 where we had changes coming at us almost every hour. And this felt like a continuous process. So as we emerge and make progress to what comes next, I want you to think about what you've experienced when it comes to that shift. Maybe the work you were doing or you signed up for doing doesn't even exist right now. What do you need to think about and how you adjust to finding new connection to the work that is available? One of my favorite ways to look at this, and especially for leaders and helpers, is that we have a core responsibility to meet people where they're at, not where we expect them to be. It's so important that we honor in that U shape where people are at. Now, while I hope and will always want people not to get stuck, as a helper and as a leader, I've got to pay attention to where they're at because I may be at a different space and place. that I may have moved on and had time to process and I see new opportunity, but my coworker may not be. They may still be at that bargaining stage. And if I want to be helpful, if I want to be supportive, if I want to be that great team member, I'm going to recognize that they're there. And I'm going to offer to see if there's anything I can do to support them, to be an encourager, and to help them see what might come next. Consider over these last months, what change or changes have impacted your work the most? What does that feel like? Being able to name it and understand that I miss that. I have not missed something else, right? But that change, that shift in the work itself and what you might be able to learn from that. Here's what we also know though, is you gotta wanna. I always want to apologize to my grandmother for using that statement as a published poet and English guru. That's probably not the best phrasing, but I love my grandmother, and yet I still love this phrase. I love my grandmother way more, but this phrase speaks to me, and it's just my way, my casual of saying you gotta wanna. If you get stuck, you have to want to move on. If you have experienced a change from this to that, you have to want to move. And if you don't want to, I can try all I want, but essentially you have to want to do it. So that's where it ties to motivation. Motivation, by definition, is that spark or a drive to satisfy something you need or you think you need. Motivation is that propellant. It's what pushes us. It's that fire to achieve something, to go after something, to even just get out of bed and stop hitting snooze in the morning. So I want you to go back to that music question for a moment. I want you to think about a song or a lyric that the moment you hear it just immediately improves your motivation. It just gives you some get up and go. Can you name it? What song do you rely on that just feeds your spirit, that just pushes you? Now, if you're a movie fan, you might recognize the theme song and scene of Rocky, right? And whether it's Eye of the Tiger or some of that music that just moved him to the top of those stairs, right, as part of his training routine for the big fight. There's so many other songs that speak to people in different ways. Maybe for you, it's Mandisa's Overcomer. Maybe for you, it's Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, right? There are so many great songs out there by artists who just knew how to capture in words and sound that moment that goes, oh, I got this, I can do this. And it is that motivation we want to consider today. So about the changes you've experienced over these months, what motivates you or demotivates you about that change? We have all different kinds of examples where the COVID pandemic has created change that some people are like, oh, I kind of like this better. But yet it feels weird to say that because at the same time, there have been so many changes where that change hasn't been welcome, or it's been hard, or it's been devastating. So even just capturing for a few minutes today, what motivates you or demotivates you about that change or the changes you've experienced? If we connect that to a tool, I love looking at the research on emotional intelligence because it's all wrapped together. These four areas, these four domains that are on your screen right now, are wrapped in motivation. You have to want to work at this. And the good news for us, if we want to get better at this, we can do that. Emotional intelligence, beyond the first domain of motivation, has these four additional domains for us to consider. We need to look at self-awareness and self-management. How I'm feeling today and how many other people know it. Ripple effect, right? How I'm feeling today and what does that do for me? Does it have a carryover? How many people know that I'm either having a good day or a bad day? We also know the importance of social awareness, being able to read cues from other people, and then relationship management, knowing how to reach out, the words to say. And so let's look at a few key points in each of those areas that might just help us pause a little bit to understand that when the work has shifted and the change has happened and our motivation might have been impacted, what are some of the areas we can work on to be a better professional, be a better supporter, be a better parent, be a better team member, be a better boss, a leader for our teams using some of these tools? Self-awareness. You've heard me already say one of my favorite phrases, name it. I would rather have someone say, you know what, it frustrated me. Good, own it. Frustrated you. Now, what do you want to do with it? People say to me all the time, as within my own work as a workplace psychologist, as I'm working with teams or individuals in a setting, someone will say to me, Selena, it just made me mad. They did that and it made me mad. Own it. Made you mad. Now, what do you want to do with it? Because I think it's really important not only for us to name it, but to recognize that if that's the emotion it created and that's what we're feeling, it's okay. It's not good or bad. As soon as you start telling yourself, I shouldn't be this upset, well, you are. Own it. It's not good or bad. So being able to spot your emotions and even knowing some of those hot buttons, some of those things that just stir you up faster. Since we're talking about work, maybe it's a certain person and their email shows up with their name on it and you already know it sets you off. And that doesn't have to be anger. It doesn't have to be a high rate of emotion, but just knowing what stirs it up in you. We also know, just even back to our music example, sometimes music just stirs us up in great ways. But we also want to pay attention to those hot buttons that may derail us or may make us more distracted or may have an impact on how much work we get done today. Self-management. So if I can name it and feel it and know it, I need to then understand what to do with it. Number one is a combination of 4 key pieces we know that are critical: breathe, sleep, move, and fuel, or food, right? So we know the power of breath. We know that emotions are more in control when you've had good sleep. We know the power of movement, and we know the importance of food as fuel. Those are 4 critical areas to managing ourselves and making sure we're at the top of our game. We also know the importance of taking control of the self-talk. If you remember some of the cartoon characters along the way that had an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder, right? And they would say certain things to the character, and what would they act upon? We need to make sure we're telling ourselves good things too. When the work has changed and our motivation has been impacted, what we tell ourselves about that, the stories we tell ourselves, become really important to how we move through that process. Because it is an opportunity to focus on what we can do, not just what we can't do. It's a great time to remember how to keep that sense of humor, knowing that people have fun in different ways, knowing that not everybody sees humor in the same way, but that we can use that ability to create laughter as a way to navigate even some of the toughest stuff. It is also a neat opportunity to reach out and share, to be able to share with someone else what your experience has been, to meet them where they're at and understand and listen to their experience. Social awareness. Our third domain out of these 4, again, all wrapped together with you gotta wanna motivation. Social awareness is being able to pick up on cues in other people without explicitly being told how they're feeling. It's important that we continue to pay attention to body language. And even if we are more separated physically, to be able to read emotions and voice and facial expressions and body posture. It is also important to still check our timing. A lot of times when we are working in geographically dispersed teams, when we're not co-located together, when we were co-located together, we got cues. We could hear each other. We knew when to ask each other a question. When we can't see each other and we're in different locations, we're not sure what the timing looks like. Maybe you're up against a deadline. Maybe you got 3 phone calls waiting. I don't know that unless I ask. And when we have conversations, we need to remember the power of being fully present. There will be always lots of things that try to get our attention. And yet what we know is that power of presence, giving someone our undivided attention so that they feel heard. We can respond in whatever way we need to, strengthens that relationship. It's so important to be able to see it from somebody else's perspective, especially right now. To be able to walk in their shoes and see what their challenges are and understand it without applying our own framework, bias, or perspective to it. Sometimes we also just need to take a step back and see the big picture. Many of us in our professional lives dig in what we do really well. And sometimes we lose perspective and need to step back and see how in our systems things connect. Our last area for this builds on those relationships by acknowledging each other's feelings, by saying, I hear your frustration. I can see this upset you. By acknowledging their feelings, it again helps reinforce the fact that their feelings are theirs. They're real. That is one of the most personal experiences we have. And by having the insight to be able to validate for somebody else, not because they need validation, but because you want to be supportive. When you care, show it. Even in difficult and challenging times for organizations, I don't want you to avoid the tough conversations, even right now. Because if you're feeling it and the other person's feeling it, while you need to choose your timing and place, putting it off may not be the right answer. It may cause both of you more stress now, and on top of other factors, we don't need to add to that. This is also a reminder that we need to receive feedback well. If somebody else is genuinely trying to be helpful, to give us some feedback on something we can do to show up for them better, that we can be there for them, we need to receive that feedback, not go all ego on them, not start making excuses, even if we know there's no possible way we can start implementing what they're asking. We need to receive it and thank them, and really honor the fact that they have the courage to give us feedback to help us improve. Because if I don't do that, there's a very good chance they won't be as helpful next time. I'm also convinced this world would be a very different place if we all owned it and apologized sooner. The power of saying, I am sorry this has been your experience. I'm sorry I wasn't helpful on this. I missed it. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. I tell my team all the time, I make mistakes every day. It's just on me to make new ones. It's on me to learn what I've done, how I need to make it better. And even though I still make some of those same mistakes, I'm responsible for them. And that's a critical part to building great relationships with others. So consider for just a moment how you can use some of those strategies to help you navigate the now. Is it naming it? Self-awareness? Is it self-management? Being able to take good care of yourself so that you can have the strength and the energy to do the work you need to do? Is it being open and attentive to others in social awareness? Or is it saying the words that you need to say right now to build or repair relationships? 2020 has been challenging in so many ways. And while certainly in social and physical distancing, we've talked more about 6 feet than ever, I don't mean it that way. I think it's a great opportunity to remind ourselves that we're all going to make mistakes. We all have challenges, and an opportunity to offer each other some space and some grace. Some opportunity to remember that we can all learn, we can all get better at this, and we're all going to make some mistakes along the way. It is my pleasure to be a resource for you. And right here in Eastern Iowa, whether it's in the state, the region, or beyond, I am here to just help along this journey, While I'm focused on our work life in particular because of my fascination with organizations and how we drive results, whether that's care for people, services provided, or products we produce, it is my ongoing pleasure to be part of the story, the fabric of our organizations, to be able to think about how we can continue to do that better with and through the strength of our people. Thank you for tuning in. If there's anything I can help with along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out. I wish you all the best. Take care and be well. Thank you very much.